We're excited to announce the first ever, first of its kind higher education podcast conference, brought to you by Edu Alliance, the Edu Experience, and Podium. This is happening Saturday, July 12th at the University of Illinois Chicago campus. This is an in-person event, one day only, the first of its kind. This is for people working in and around higher education who are interested in starting a podcast, who may have a podcast, want to learn more about podcasting. So if you want to be there, please go to higheredpodcon.com. That's higheredpodcon.com to learn how you can get your early bird registration, see who the keynote will be, and how you can submit proposals to be a part of this amazing inaugural conference. So that, again, go to higheredpodcon.com to learn more.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Ed Up Experience podcast, where we make education your business. I am your host today, Dr. Jody Blinko. I have with us Dr. Danny Brassell, co-founder of the Well-Crafted Story Workshop. Danny, welcome, and thank you for being here with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Jody, and more importantly, thanks for spreading some joy in the world. We need a lot more of you, a lot less of this horrible show I was watching the other day called The News. It just really depressed me.
You're right. Well, thank you for that. Yes. Well, welcome. And Danny, tell us more about you first and foremost, but also tell us about the Well-Crafted Story Workshop and whatever else you want us to know. We'll start there.
Oh, I don't know if I'm that interesting. My background is in academia and journalism and all kinds of things like that. My co-founder of the Well-Crafted Story Workshop is Coach Jimmy Hayes Nelson. I always kid that we should be called the professor and the poet because my background's more academic and he's off of Broadway. And what we do is we empower leaders to transform their personal experiences into powerful business stories that inspire action, drive growth, and create lasting impact. We only measure success of well-crafted speeches in one way and one way only. Does your audience decide to take the next step with you, whether that's an unpaid offer like subscribe to my podcast or book a free phone call, or maybe a paid offer like buy my product or invest in my coaching program? We only measure our success with clients in one way is, are we helping people build up their client database?
Well, I think that's a really this whole conversation is a very interesting perspective and angle for those folks who are listening, which are in higher education and from all angles of supporting higher education institutions. So with that being said, for the individuals listening to this podcast, their measurement of success would ultimately be, are we really speaking to an audience to engage them and have them decide that higher education is in fact a next step for them on whatever place they are along their journey? So is higher ed something that they want to take the next step on? And do they want to take that next step with us, from an institution perspective? And then most important, can we get them across the stage to graduation? So I'm curious, Danny, to your thoughts as you think about that from a storytelling and engagement standpoint, and with that kind of being the measurement of success. I might be putting you on the spot a little bit here, but what would be your thoughts to folks listening to this to say, how do we best tell our story? How do we tell it authentically? And how do we have that ultimate measurement of conversion of do students say, yes, I want to take the next step and pursue my education. Yes, I want that to be with you. And yes, I'm going to persist and walk across the stage in graduation. How do we take what you do and think about it through that lens?
Yeah, there's a lot piled in there, Jody. So among my many hats, I still am in academia and higher education. I'm still a faculty advisor for the Cal State Teach program, and we're always trying to recruit more students into the program. I'm also a visiting distinguished professor at the American University in Cairo. Say that 5 times fast.
Right, yeah.
One of the things I do there, I always love to speak to the local elementary schools in the Cairo area. It's kind of interesting. A couple of years ago, I went to my first Muslim school, and I was kind of intimidated. I'm a Christian guy. I was like, I don't know how they're going to receive me. Oh my goodness, Jody. 2:00 in the afternoon, 400 parents show up for a parent training on reading. All the guys had the long beards. All the women were in burqas. And we were talking like you and I are talking right now. And I basically said to myself, shame on me. What were my preconceptions? And so the way I started off my talk with them was so I was reading this book the other day. Have any of you ever read the Quran? And they all laughed. And I said, oh, well, then you know the story when the angel Gabriel appears in the cave to Muhammad. What's the first thing he instructs Muhammad to do? Because the first pillar of Islam is to read. So I looked at the parents. I said, so what you're saying is not only should we get your kids reading, it's actually written in your most sacred text that it's your duty to get your kids reading. And all of a sudden I had 400 heads nodding in agreement. I'm like, oh my goodness, who would have thought the Christian dude's favorite audiences are Muslims? They're absolutely favorite audiences. And basically what I did to reach out to them, I took them through the exact same process that I take all of our clients when we're doing the Well-Crafted Story workshops. Before you create any kind of speech, so I'm speaking directly to all those higher ed administrators and CEOs, CFOs, people like that. Before you deliver any kind of presentation, you have to have clarity in what the goal of your presentation is. There's two questions that are essential, and you'd be amazed. 95% of my clients cannot answer these two basic questions. The first question is this: who is your audience? Now, I'll ask that to clients. They'll say, oh, my audience is everybody. I'm like, well, if your audience is everybody, you have nobody in your audience. You need to get very specific and think about who your audience is. And so if I'm a higher ed institution, I'm going to make sure I create an avatar in my mind of what does our ideal student look like? Maybe I'm at a community college and my ideal student is in their middle 30s. They're trying to take some classes to advance their education. Maybe I'm at a four-year university and I'm looking for that top freshman that, the more I read some of the newsletters of the institutions I attended, I'm like, wow, I don't think I could actually qualify to attend this university anymore. These freshmen are amazing. So that's the first question, is who is your audience? The second question is, what is the problem that you solve? And the biggest mistake I see when we work with people on this question is most people don't tell me problems, they tell me solutions. So for example, last week we were working with a whole bunch of fitness instructors and I said, well, what's the problem that you solve? They said, healthy eating and exercise. I'm like, well, that's not a problem. That's actually a good thing. Healthy eating and exercise are good things. Probably the problem is you're trying to battle obesity. And help people live longer. We work with financial planners, and I asked a financial planner, what's the problem you solve? He said, a good retirement. I'm like, well, good retirement's actually a good thing. Maybe the problem you're addressing is, will you have enough money to survive for the rest of your life? And so if you can answer those two questions, you're in good shape. If you can't answer those two questions, I would suggest that you're probably going to be in a real struggle. And so all the people listening there, it's very important to niche it down. And I always say, go for the lowest hanging fruit. So for example, you and I were speaking earlier, and when I started my speaking career, I used to be a teacher. And so the first group of people I spoke to were teachers because I felt very comfortable with teachers. Well, then I started speaking to administrators as well. And then I started speaking to parents. And then I was in a mastermind. And one of the guys in my mastermind wanted me to teach his sales team. And I said, Brad, I have no experience in sales. I don't think I can train your sales team. And he looked at me like I was an idiot. And he said, Danny, if you can get inner city teenagers to read Shakespeare, I'm pretty sure you can motivate my sales team.
Love it. Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. Yeah.
It got me to really broaden my horizons. But the reason I share that is I've gradually expanded the number of people that I'm serving. And so I always tell people, yeah, you can eventually serve everybody, but you got to start with niching it down. And the way you do that is by answering both of those clarity questions.
Oh, I like where you just went with the verbiage of serving. And would it be fair to, you said started off, who is your audience, but like having institutions think about who do they serve and who do they serve best? And what is the problem, like you said, that they are looking to solve, and starting to gain clarity in your story. And once you have that clarity, things like messaging and marketing and the student experience and what kind of experience do we want our students to have, those questions become easier to answer because you have that clarity in who you are and what you're trying to offer to the world through education.
Yeah, and you picked up on something really important, Jody. I have people all the time. They're like, "Well, how do I sell without sounding salesy?" And here's the strategy. This is a secret strategy. Stop selling.
Secret. Let's go. Let's go.
Stop,
Confidential.
stop selling. Start serving. Like if you look at your audience, this is how you're going to have a lot more success in life. First of all, I believe when you're on stage, whether your audience decides to take that next step or not, you have a responsibility to them because they gave you their most precious asset, their time.
Their time.
And so I need to help them solve some problems in the short term and the long term. But the more I get in a mindset, I really train people when they're speaking is I want you to look at your audience as if they're dying and you have the antidote. And if they don't get your antidote, they will die. And when you have it from that point of view that I'm really serving my audience, you're going to do a lot more better than these people that are, I watch 10 speakers a day. I used to go to infomercials. I had this one guy, he was just a not classy, he was a classic guy. He had his hair slicked back. He was in his fancy suit. And he said, there are two types of people in this world, good, hardworking people and rich people. And I'm like, ugh. I have to take a shower after watching this guy.
Yeah.
He was the sleaziest salesman ever. And the thing is, in 2025, people are very sophisticated in your audience. They know when they're being conned. Russell Brunson, wonderful online marketer, he has a phrase that I really agree with. He says, "It has never been more difficult to get the first dollar out of customers' pockets, and it has never been easier to get the second dollar."
Yeah.
And what
love that.
You have to build trust, and the way you build trust is be trustworthy, serve.
This is so let me get my words right. So I was talking with she's a faculty psychologist. I cannot recall the school, and it's in Southern California, but she said these words to me. This is probably a couple months ago. I told her, I said, I will give you copyright to that every single time I use it. But she said to me, human beings are the most exquisite detectors of BS. And it has stuck with me. And it's so true. You talk about being trustworthy and not selling at all, but coming from a place of service. And I think we really miss that in any sort of sales process, if you will. Like we're all in sharing and engaging with the purpose, right? And so when we think about, do we really understand the human being that's in front of us? Are we really even thinking about them as a human being? Or are we just so focused on our own agenda that we lose sight that this is a human being that has feelings and emotions and fears and anxieties? And so there's so much to as you well know, the power of storytelling to build that connection and create that sense of, I'm a human being just like you, and we're all in this together. And so if I have something to offer you that will serve you, then, and we've got a strong connection, then it becomes just a natural relationship moving forward, and I think we overthink some of that sometimes.
That's well said, Jody. I have a friend and he teaches people how to be authentic, and I always give him a hard time. I'm like, well, if you have to teach them how to be authentic, maybe they're not being authentic.
Yeah.
Brene Brown, she's a wonderful speaker. She talks about the importance of vulnerability, and I completely agree with her. If there's one strategy I could share with your audience right now, and it's this: stop talking about your successes and start talking about your failures, because not everybody in your audience has succeeded, but they've all failed. And the more you talk about your own failures, the more you're going to build that trust with your audience. So for example, if I'm a college administrator and I'm trying to boost admissions and get people, I'm going to talk to, becoming a college student is a major life transition. Most of these freshmen, they're terrified. They have no idea what to expect. Yeah. So the way you build that trust is by talking about what it was like when you were a freshman. When I was in high school, I only applied to one university. I applied to Yale. I had the test scores, I had the letters of recommendation, I had the activities, the grades, everything. And I remember I got the rejection letter on Tuesday. Well, in high school, I was a pretty decent football player, and I had been recruited heavily to play football in college. And I was a pouty 17-year-old. And the moment I got my rejection letter from Yale, I went alphabetically down the list and looked for the very first university that did not have a football team. And I discovered American University in Washington, D.C. And that's how I chose my university. It turned out to be one of the best decisions of my life. I would totally share that story with freshmen to show that I have 3 college age children of my own right now, and they're always struggling. They're like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I'm like, my goodness, I've changed my entire life focus like 8 times already. You shouldn't know. You're only 20 years old. What's important to learn is what you don't like to do. I mean, I worked on Capitol Hill when I was in college. And I always tell people in high school, I used to clean toilets at a health club. And when given the choice, I would much rather clean toilets at a health club than ever work on Capitol Hill again.
Wow, that says something. Yeah.
Oh yeah, well, a lot of nasty people. I don't want to be around nasty people.
Yeah.
Life's too short. Like this is why I'm hanging out with you, Jody. I like you the moment I meet you. Like she's smiling, she's happy, she gets it. Everybody in the audience, life is too short. Get rid of the negativity. Surround yourself with people that boost you up.
Right on. Well, that's a perfect segue. Danny, I want to take us back to before we hit record, we were having a little bit of a conversation and you were sharing with me about if you ever wrote your autobiography, that what the title would be. And I think that fits a little bit to what you just shared. So talk to us a little bit about that, your autobiography and the title and the inspiration behind that.
Yeah, you're putting me on the spot, Jody. Yeah, if I had an autobiography, I'd call it Pivots because I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. Over 30 years ago, I used to be a journalist. I actually got to cover President Bush Sr. in the 1992 presidential election. I loved journalism. I had a great job. It put me in touch with all the major editors of major newspapers in America. And one editor of a major daily offered me a job doing the city beat for $16,500 a year. Well, then a friend of mine told me that they were hiring teachers in South Central Los Angeles for $25,000 a year. So I became an educator for the noblest of reasons, for the high pay. And I found out I absolutely loved teaching. I eventually moved into being a professor at a college. And then in 2005, my wife and I attended a real estate seminar, which turned out to be a scam, and we lost everything. And I could focus on all the negatives, but I'm a positive person. I like to focus on the positives. First of all, my wife is my life mate. I put her through the ringer, and she stuck right by me. Incredible human being. Second of all, I no longer look at money as the end all be all because I realize you can lose it just like that in a second. Third, I try not to judge other people because if I was somebody who looked at what I had done, I would have said, well, you deserve that. But now I realize if you don't know everything about a person, you really don't know anything about a person. Fourth, I became a Christian, which I'm always embarrassed to admit, but the more I read the Bible, I'm not the first screw up to find Jesus. And fifth, I didn't want to file for bankruptcy, and my accountant said, well, if you want to prevent yourself from filing bankruptcy, you're going to have to make this much more money this year, Danny. And so I started speaking on the side, and I hit the number right on the number. Well, the next year, Jody, he gave me a much higher number, and I hit that number right on the number. So in year 3, I thought, well, maybe I should set a higher number. And basically, during one of the worst economic downturns in American history, I was able to build up a very profitable speaking business, which was going well. And then in 2020, a thing called COVID came around, and people asked, well, Danny, how's your speaking doing? I'm like, oh, the way I just lost 200 speaking engagements last night because they just shut down the world, I'm doing great. Well, for years, Jody, people have been asking me to coach them to be better speakers. I always avoided that because you need to know this about me. I have a very high standard for my students. I want them to succeed. I hold people accountable, and I'm kind of on your back until you will succeed. But coaching entrepreneurs and executives has been wonderful because I find that they're highly motivated and they'll do the work. One of my mentors was a guy named Jim Rohn, and Jim used to say, you can't pay other people to do your push-ups. Translation, you got to do the work. And I absolutely love, I mean, sure, I still, every now and then I work with a person that they're paying me an exorbitant amount of money, and then they don't listen to what I have to say. And I'm okay, I'll cash the check. But to me, fulfillment isn't me just coaching you, it's you actually succeeding. That's what's fulfilling to me. So it's a very long answer to your short question, but yeah, I've wandered in lots of different directions throughout my life, and I'm excited to see where life takes me next.
Yeah. And I love your openness. Like you said, you gotta look for the opportunity and pivot and it sounds to me too like you've learned something new along the way at every pivot, at every turn, but there's an openness to that learning from you too, and to be able to get there. Yeah.
If you're not learning, you're slowly dying. So I try to be a student.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the post-its on my desk is my favorite post-it. I wrote myself a note, I think every American should have this post-it on their desk. It says, "What if I'm wrong?" Like, everybody seems to be right nowadays. And I realized, maybe I should listen more and stop giving my viewpoint all the time. Maybe if we listened a little bit better to each other. Yeah, and again, I used to teach history. I always tell my students, I'm like, my job as your teacher is not to teach you what to think, it's to teach you how to think.
How to
And
think.
be a better student is to be respectful of others. You don't have to agree with them. I mean, I disagree with my wife all the time, but it doesn't mean I don't love and respect her. And I think we'd be much better off. That's why I love listening to podcasts like yours. I hate watching the news. I love watching people speak. I love the speakers that inspire. I can't stand the depressing stories. I'm into people that are offering hope, because we need a lot more hope in the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, tell us a follow-up question to the pivots that you've had along your journey and the hope. What are some ways that you have dug in and found that hope or that resilience when maybe you thought, I don't have it today, and I'm sure there are days like that, but what are some of your best practices that you could share where you've been able to dig in and make that pivot or make that turn when you maybe didn't feel like it or didn't have the hope or didn't see the path forward?
Wow, that's an amazing question, Jody. Nobody's actually ever asked me that question. I dig in again. I try to practice what I preach. I try to surround myself with people that lift me up. And one of my mentors was a guy named Charlie Tremendous Jones, and Charlie used to say, "You're the same today as you will be in 5 years, except for two things: the people you meet and the books you read." And he always cautioned, make sure you surround yourself with people that lift you up, and make sure you fill your mind with books that are very positive. And so I choose to read things. I was reading this book. A lot of people think it's good. I think it's great. It says you should try and treat other people the way you want to be treated. And I find that that's a pretty good thing. That book covers a lot of the problems I've ever had. And actually, it covers pretty much every problem I have. I'm like, wow, there's people that have had these problems before. Yeah, I like to read a lot of positive things. And I've always invested heavily in making sure to get really good coaches. And people always ask me when they hire me as a coach, like, well, why should you hire me? I'm like, well, I'm really good at helping. I was working with a gentleman yesterday, and he gave me a 38-minute speech, and I said, well, I apologize. I'm going to give you 7 pages of notes, and we're going to go minute by minute on what you can do to improve. And he was just blown away. And I said, well, this is how you get better, is I'm going to show you exactly what you can do to make this stronger. And he was doing a lot of things really well. And I actually pointed out to him why he was doing these things well. I'm drifting away from your question. I like to surround myself with positivity. I learned a lot of that from my wife. I'm pretty much convinced my wife doesn't even know who the president of the United States is, because all she does is watch I Love Lucy and Sex and the City and things that make her laugh. And
there you go. Maybe that's the secret. Just laugh,
yeah, really. I mean, it was I used to volunteer for the Special Olympics, and the reason I love working with charities is I feel like I begin by doing it thinking I'm helping others, and the fact is exactly the reverse. I mean, the Special Olympics is one of the most extraordinary things I watch all the time. Is just kids that are so dang happy, and I'm like, wow, they found something that I need to find. And so those are the things. I love stories of joy. I mean, it's kind of drives my wife crazy because I love sports. And she's like, why are you watching this? I'm like, because at any moment, something extraordinary can happen. We have no idea. I mean, she hates it when I watch the Olympics because I usually root against America. And she's like, why are you rooting against America? I'm like, honey, who am I going to root for? The American guy with his brand new Nikes with the microchips in the heel, or the barefoot Sudanese refugee who just survived a civil war.
Right on. Yeah.
Stories like, I learned how to run by running away from the bullets in my village. I'm like, of course I'm rooting for that guy. I love those underdog stories. And so that's the thing I try to do, is I try to really focus on those types of stories. And I have little interest in the negative things that people love to fill their minds with every day.
Tell us, share with us a little bit more about the Reading Habits Parent Program. We've talked a little bit about the Well-Crafted Story Workshop. I want to hear a little bit about this, and then I want to have you share more about what your coaching process is like, because I'm sure folks are interested in that.
Higher Ed PodCon is coming. Go to higheredpodcon.com. That's higheredpodcon.com to learn more.
Well, the Reading Habit is the world's top reading engagement program, which in just over 2 months shows parents how to get their kids to read more, read better, and most importantly, to love reading. Because I find that schools do an adequate job of teaching kids how to read. But the question I always ask people is, well, what good is it teaching a kid how to read if they never want to read? I teach kids why to read because I've never had to tell a kid, go turn on the TV. I've never had to tell a kid, go play a video game. And I never want to have to tell a kid, go read. I want them to choose to do it because they love to do it. And there's simple strategies I share with parents to get kids to love reading. And it's kind of funny how this program began. I was in India, I believe in 2018, touring schools. And this one principal opened up a door. And Jody, there's 5,000 kids in the room. There's 15 newspapers and 5 TV stations. And the principal says, and now for the next hour, Dr. Brassell is going to teach us the 3 secrets to reading better. Jody, nobody has told me I'm speaking, and I have no such speech, but I got 5,000 kids right there.
Oh, no.
And so fortunately it was India, so I got to speak a little bit slower. So I looked at the kids and I'm like, today I am going to teach you the 3 secrets to reading better. Who wants to learn the 3 secrets? And the kids are going crazy. And in my head, I'm thinking, what the heck are the 3 secrets to reading better? And basically using the process that Coach Jimmy and I take our clients with today on how to create a well-crafted story. In 30 seconds, I came up with a speech, which I not only delivered to that school, I wound up delivering that same speech to 30 other schools. That speech that night was broadcast to 1.5 billion people in India.
Wow.
And formed the basis of the program, The Reading Habit. So I can tell, and so it kind of leads into your next question about what's the process that we take our clients through. So of course I'm an educator, so everything has to be an acronym or an abbreviation or something. And so our process is called the 5 C's process. And just so people know what a well-crafted story, what we're doing. When I covered the president, he would have called this his stump speech. In superhero movies, they call it the origin story. Daniel Pink in his book Drive would probably call this your purpose-driven speech. Simon Sinek in his book Start With Why would say this is like your visionary statement. You can call this peanut butter and jelly. It doesn't matter what you call it. What this is the speech that you're going to deliver again and again to introduce yourself to new audiences, to get them interested in whatever it is that you're selling or pitching or promoting. For a pastor, maybe it's promoting the Bible or give me a tithe. For a politician, it's either, fundraising or vote for me. For entrepreneurs, it's like buy my product or my services. And so the 5 C's, I already introduced you to the first C. Before you write one word of your speech, you need to have clarity on your speech. And clarity, again, there's 2 questions you ask yourself. Who is your audience and what is the problem you solve? Once you get into your speech, the most important part of your speech, it's unequivocal. It's always the beginning of your speech. We call that connecting with your audience. And so when you're when you're connecting with your audience, I love how Coach Jimmy calls this. He says it's your three gotta. You got to show your audience why you're just like them. You got to show your audience why you were able to solve the problem that they're struggling with right now. And you gotta show the audience why this matters. If you can answer those first three questions in the first 5 minutes of your presentation, you're going to do a pretty good job of doing it. And really, I always say the best way to do that is by starting with a story. And so here's an exercise everybody listening can do right now or later. Get in a comfy chair with a pen and paper, a libation of choice beside you, and for an hour, write down every story that's ever happened in your life. And I don't mean the full story. I just mean triggers, like the time I locked myself out of the car in front of Costco, the time dad spilt mustard on his tie at that fancy restaurant. You'll find in like an hour, you'll come up with like 500 stories like that. So that's the first part of the exercise. The second part of the exercise is I want you to go through those triggers and figure out, what's this story really about? Oh, this is a story about loyalty. Oh, this is a story about never giving up. Oh, this is a story about love. And so if you actually looked at my computer, I literally have tens of thousands of stories in different files, so that whenever I need my audience to do a certain thing or I need a certain type of anecdote, I have a story ready to go. I'll show you how you can put it into action. I always say, I'm a little bit different than a lot of speaking coaches, because I want you laughing. I want you smiling and happy. There's 3 reasons why I do this, Jody. I mean, first of all, the world just survived a global pandemic. I think we all had some bad stuff happen to us. I don't think we need another sad story. I think we need stories of hope. Second of all, Coach Jimmy and I are teaching you how to create a presentation that you're going to deliver again and again and again. Now, if you're telling a sad story, do you really want to repeat that story 1,000 times? I mean,
no,
gosh, it's depressing. And third, and this is
just turn the news on, like you said. Yeah, just turn the news on. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, exactly. You want to be depressed. That's why all the advertisements are of antidepressants. And then third, and this is where people get angry with me, I have one objective when I'm on stage. I want you to leave feeling better than when you came in. I want you smiling, laughing, happy. I believe that there's something admirable about that as an objective. I believe these people that tell that same sad story again and again and again, by the 20th time they're telling it, those are now crocodile tears, and now they're being manipulative. And I'm not saying it's not an effective sales technique. It's a very effective sales technique. But again, I don't want to have to take a shower after I get on stage because I just manipulated my audience. I have a major problem when I see people doing that. And so I like funny stories. I've always said the best stories are from childhood because everybody peed their pants in first grade, and it's a very relatable story. So here's an example of how to take a story and frame it in a way that serves your speech. So when I was an elementary school teacher, every other teacher at my school went through hundreds, if not thousands, of Band-Aids every single school year. I mean, kids love Band-Aids. They work better than smokes on a prison yard. Well, every year I went through exactly one Band-Aid. And my colleagues always ask me, what's your secret, Danny? Well, on the first day of school, I always have one chubby little boy. We'll call him Paco. He's sitting there picking at his scab all morning long. Finally, after lunch, he has success. He starts bleeding. The annoying little girl next to him raises her hand, rubs her nose, and says, Ms. Brassell, Paco's bleeding. I'm like, oh my goodness, Paco. You know what you need? You need a Band-Aid. Now, 33 little heads look my way. I'm like, I got a drawer full of Band-Aids in my desk. And I don't have just ordinary Band-Aids. I have Mighty Morphin Power Ranger Band-Aids. And I'm going to give you the Green Ranger because he's the coolest. Now Paco's smiling. All the kids are grinning. I take Paco to my desk. I open up the drawer. I say, oh, before I put on the Band-Aid, we got to clean out the wound. That's when I show the kids the bottle of rubbing alcohol. I'm like, hey, Paco, hold my hand. This might sting a little bit. I start pouring the rubbing alcohol. He screams, ah! I put on his Band-Aid. I'm like, all right, anybody else need a Band-Aid? My students can have a skull fracture, and they will never ask me for a Band-Aid.
For a Band-Aid.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to give you Band-Aids today. I'm going to give you practical strategies on how to create a well-crafted presentation that drives your audience to take the next step with you. So you see what I did there? I was able to take the anecdote,
absolutely,
get some laughs out of people, connect with the audience, but I'm guiding them into the heart of my presentation. So connecting is key.
Yeah.
That's the second C. The next C is actually the least important, and it's the longest portion of your presentation. It's called content. And I always say the best speeches, you only attempt to try to teach your audience 3 things. Now, what's important, there's 2 things that I think are very critical when you're teaching content. The first one we've already discussed. I believe you have a responsibility to your audience, whether they decide to take the next step or not, to serve your audience. So I call it the Home Depot. You have to have a short-term solution and a long-term solution. Why do I call it the Home Depot? The short-term solution teaches your audience you can do it. The long-term solution is we can help. And so the short-term solution, this is a quick win for your audience. So for last week, one of the women I was working with, she was a psychologist. She works with a lot of people with depression. And so the quick win she's now using in her presentation, I said, well, why don't you tell your audience to bite onto a pin? A lot of people don't know this. When you bite onto a pin, it actually tricks your brain into thinking that you're smiling, and your brain produces the same number of endorphins as if you were actually smiling. So it's actually biologically possible to trick yourself into happiness. That's a quick win for her audience. This is funny. A friend of mine, one of my mentors, he used to teach parents how to get their kids, how to read aloud to their kids. And this is my favorite one, because when you serve your audience, you don't even actually, it doesn't have to relate to what you're talking about. So in the middle of his talk, he used to say, oh, I'm going to save your life. You know, if you ever lock yourself out of your car, as long as you have your cell phone, call your spouse, have your spouse at home put the car keys next to their cell phone. You put your cell phone next to the car door, it will unlock the door. I've tried this, Jody, from 3,000 miles away. It works. Doesn't work on
No way.
It works on cars. I'm serious. It's amazing. This has nothing to do with his talk, but he's got strangers coming up to him 20 years later saying, oh my gosh, you're the most helpful speaker I've ever, that saved my life. Well, you see, now the person's associating you with being helpful. Yeah. And that's the most important thing, is how can we serve the audience? Now, the long-term solution, you want to make sure that your audience knows that they can do it, but they could use your help. So that's why I always tell people, I can take you through the 5 C's, and I take you through, and it's pretty straightforward. But remember, when you're connecting with your audience, you got 3 autas that you got to do. You got to make sure that you're crafting it in a story. You need to make sure that that story accomplishes these things. Where a person now, they're like, well, I can do it, but gosh, it sounds a whole lot easier if Danny just helps me figure this out. And that's what I'm trying to, I'm not trying to be manipulative. I just know this for a fact is,
yeah.
You know, I give away stuff for free all the time. I'm like, you can do this. If you want it to be really, really good, though, you bring Coach Jimmy and me in, because we'll make sure that it really rocks. And we're going to actually pay attention until it rocks. Because failure is not, it's my Apollo 13. Failure is not an option.
Not an option. Yeah. That scene in the movie where we got to get them home. Yeah. I love it.
My goodness. Everybody, if you're ever down, just watch Apollo 13. It makes me so proud. I love that movie.
Danny, it's so funny that you say that. And then I want to have you tell the folks how they can get in touch with you and Coach Jimmy. But it's funny that you went there, because I used to use that particular snippet of Apollo 13 where they like bring in the cardboard box and they dump everything on the table and they're like, we got to get these guys home. And back, when was it 2010, 2012, like that little clip resonated when I would share that with my team, when I was just trying to get them like, hey, we got to go. We got to figure this out. Nowadays, when I try to share that clip, it doesn't resonate with the young. They're like, when is this movie from? And what is she showing us? And what's going on? And I'm like, I had one of those moments where it's like, I feel old. So anyway, tell us the important stuff. So someone listening to this wants to work with you or Coach Jimmy. What does that look like?
Well, before I do that, Jody, because I don't want to hold people hanging, because I hate it when people, so we'll just go really quickly on the last 2 C's are your call to action and the close to your presentation. And what's really important that you have to understand is there's 2 types of people in your audience. I call them the Joe Fridays and the Julia Roberts. And you need to make sure to address both of those needs, or else you're potentially losing half of your audience. So the Joe Fridays, we'll be stereotypical. Say that's usually the guy in the audience with his arms crossed. He just wants the facts. Like, how much is this going to cost? What does it do for me? How long does it take? You need to make sure to address that in your call to action. Your call to action should only be about 90 seconds long maximum. But you also have to address the needs of the Julia Roberts. The Julia Roberts, she wants to feel good. I don't care what it is that I buy. I just want to make sure that this makes me feel good. And this is where you'll see the best presentations always end on a high note. They're very uplifting. And so when you have clarity, you connect with your audience, you teach content, and you have a very clear call to action and close, then you have created what we call a well-crafted story. And as a thank you for having me today, Jody, I wanted to give everybody the actual blueprint on how you do this. So if you go to freestoryguide.com, again, freestoryguide.com, I'm going to give you your own free storytelling blueprint. What this is the exact process we take clients through on how to create a well-crafted story. What this does for you is it takes the guesswork out of putting together an effective presentation and shows you the key elements that you need to include. And what this means to you is you don't have to stress the next time you're getting on stage. I work with people all the time that, Jerry Seinfeld had the line, Americans' number one fear is public speaking. Number two is death. So if you ever go to a funeral, more people would rather be in the coffin than delivering the eulogy. I deal with people like that all the time. And I want to speak to those people in the audience right now. You can do this. We can help you. I work with people. It's a skill. It's something, I guarantee you the first time you had this podcast, Jody, you stunk. Mm-hmm. And the second time you did it,
I still might.
No. The second time you did it, you stunk, but you stunk a little bit less than the first time. And now you're into a flow where it's no problem. It's second nature. You're able to ask questions without having them written down. You're able to listen to the guest and everything. And it's the same thing with speaking. The way you build confidence, it's the reps. And so if you go to freestoryguide.com, you'll get that goodie. And I just wanted to thank you for giving me this time today, Jody. Hopefully I was able to serve the audience and bring a smile to people's faces.
Absolutely. Without question. And you're giving away free stuff. Who doesn't love free stuff? So I think there's so much that this audience can take away from the 5 C's that you provided. It also, at the very beginning, we talked about those 2 questions, really thinking about not only individually, but on a larger scale for your institution. How are you integrating these 5 C's in all of your storytelling? And from every angle, I think there's so much value here, again, organizationally, and then for folks who are interested in pursuing this path, maybe working with you or Coach Jimmy directly to up level and share their message and offer their gift to the world. So reach out to Dr. Danny Brassell, co-founder of the Well-Crafted Story Workshop. And thank you again for being here, sharing your energy, your spark, your wisdom. I feel like I've learned so much just in the last 50 minutes. Before I officially sign us off, I promised you I was going to ask you one question. I think you've answered that question multiple times over with so many nuggets of value, but what would be your words of wisdom, Danny, that you would share with folks listening to this podcast?
Higher Ed PodCon is coming. Go to higheredpodcon.com. That's higheredpodcon.com to learn more.
Well, probably from J.K. Rowling used to say, don't let the muggles get you down in the Harry Potter books. You can totally do this. I was speaking in India and pumped up the kids. And this one little boy came up to me with tears in his eyes. He was about 6 years old. And I noticed he was missing his left arm. And so I crouched down to his level. He said, how can I succeed? And I crouched down to his level. I said, when I was your age, I went to 18 different schools before I was 12 years old. Everybody called me stupid because I stuttered. And eventually I went to a school and the teacher worked with me one-on-one and she would sing things to me and I found I could sing them back without my stutter. And I gradually lost my stutter and I became a swan. But I looked at that little boy in the eyes and I'm like, isn't it interesting that the little boy everybody used to say was stupid and couldn't talk right now gets paid ridiculous sums of money to travel the world to do what? and he had the biggest grin on his face. He said, "Speak." I'm like, "Don't let anybody ever tell you what you
Oh,
do."
wow.
So that's
I
what
just
I
got goosebumps. Thank you, Danny. Thank you. That was a perfect ending to a fantastic conversation. Thank you all for listening. I'm your host, Dr. Jody Blinko, our guest here today. Thank you for the free gift. freestoryguide.com is where you want to go. Dr. Danny Brassell, co-founder of the Well-Crafted Story Workshop, working closely with Coach Jimmy. Go check them out. And thank you all for being a part of this episode of the Ed Up Experience. You've just been Ed Upped.